In less than 4 months' time, in early 1775, American forces had gone from capturing just Fort Ticonderoga to launching a full-scale invasion of the province of Quebec to the north. The capture of this fort in May of 1775 pushed the question of Canada to the forefront of strategic and political thinking that summer. The proximity of Ticonderoga to its neighbor to the north, Quebec, as well as simmering tensions between Canada and the American colonies to the south, meant that Canada hung in the balance that summer, either as a platform for a British-led invasion and assault of the 13 rebellious colonies, or as a potential 14th ally in the broader war against British oppression. Since the conquest of Canada in 1760, the British government had struggled to integrate the French-speaking Catholic population into their broader empire. The passage of the Quebec Act in 1774 accomplished much of this integration. It appealed to the French population by tolerating Catholicism and retaining French civil law within the province. But the act further alienated American colonists to the south by expanding Quebec's borders dramatically, cutting into American plans for westward expansion. The Governor's Council of Quebec was also expanded, and Catholics were allowed to serve on it. This alarmed American colonists who saw the growth of an enormous colony without representative government that they felt might be expanded still further to suppress their own liberties. But Canada also provided an opportunity. Many English-speaking colonists to the province, who had emigrated there since the conquest in 1760, were also unsatisfied by the Quebec Act, which failed to give them the benefits of traditional English government. In late 1774, the First Continental Congress appealed directly to Canadians to join them in resisting British oppression. And in the winter of 1775, Pittsfield, Massachusetts lawyer John Brown traveled to Montreal to directly assess Canadian support for the American cause. In his report, he noted that very few Canadians would join the Continental Association. The capture of Fort Ticonderoga raised the stakes considerably. And the same day the Second Continental Congress learned of the capture, Benedict Arnold was already raiding across the provincial border to Saint-Jean, bringing the war to Canada's doorstep. Congress, in the days afterward, struggled to frame the capture of Ticonderoga as defensive, to prevent a British incursion from the north. And again, they appealed directly to Canadians to assure them that their war was with the British government alone, and prohibited American forces from invading the province. In response to American military actions, Canada's governor, General Guy Carleton, declared martial law in June and prepared to raise a Canadian militia to augment the small number of regulars and loyalists then raising in the province. But many habitants, even if unwilling to support the American rebellion, were equally as unwilling to be mobilized and possibly marched outside of the province. And in many places, they resisted these militia call-ups. Meanwhile, Canada's Catholic Church and many of the elite staked a position behind the government against the revolutionaries, further influencing many in the province. But the resistance of some Canadians, the favorable correspondence with others that supported the American efforts, and intelligence about the limited number of British troops actually in the province justified Americans in neutralizing the British threat, and possibly bringing Canadians and Native Americans onto their side, thus unifying the continent. On June 27, 1775, Congress ordered Major General Philip Schuyler to Ticonderoga and authorized, if Canadians were not disagreeable, to advance across the provincial line into Canada, seizing Saint-Jean, Montreal, or any other post in the colony that the British could use to harass American positions. July 18th, Schuyler arrived at Fort Ticonderoga to take command of the growing force of Connecticut, Massachusetts, and finally, New York troops that were there. He faced a daunting task, instilling discipline, stockpiling supplies of food, arms, and ammunition, finding shelter, and importantly, building the boats that would be needed to take the American army north into Canada. To ease his burden, General George Washington informed Schuyler of a diversionary attack that he was planning, to be led by the erstwhile commander of Fort Ticonderoga, Benedict Arnold, who had resigned his command in June. This attack would move north up the Kennebec River in Maine to approach Quebec City from the south, drawing off British troops that might otherwise contest Schuyler's advance down the Champlain Valley into the Richelieu. In mid-August, Schuyler was pulled away to Albany in his capacity as Commissioner for Northern Indian Affairs. There, he would participate in a council with the Six Nations of the Haudenosaunee, whom the Americans hoped to keep neutral. Schuyler left Ticonderoga under the command of General Richard Montgomery. The Irish-born Montgomery had served on Lake Champlain in the last war, but frustrated with his ability to be promoted, emigrated to New York in 1772, where he married into a wealthy and revolutionary family. His experience was rewarded with his appointment as the 2nd Brigadier General in the Continental Army. Schuyler continued to issue orders to prevent hostilities with Canadians and Native Americans. But one incident threatened to topple this delicate balance. In a mid-August scout across the border, Captain Remember Baker, a Green Mountain boy and cousin of Ethan Allen's, fired at a party of natives. Baker's gun misfired, but given the provocation, the natives fired back, killing him. Baker had directly disobeyed his orders, potentially upsetting Schuyler's careful diplomacy. On August 25th, a member of Baker's scout returned to Ticonderoga with news of British troop concentrations at Fort Saint-Jean. More alarmingly, he reported there were 2 vessels nearing completion. If launched, they could contest control of Lake Champlain, opening the colonies to attack. To preserve the initiative gained by capturing Fort Ticonderoga in May, and with intelligence from friends in Canada that habitants were waiting to welcome the American liberators as they crossed the border, General Montgomery initiated the American invasion of Canada. In less than 2 months, a continental prohibition on any incursion had evolved into a full-scale invasion of Canada. The colonial forces that had loosely assembled that spring had now coalesced into a continental army that was preparing for a major military offensive along a well-trodden corridor last used by the British Army on their own conquest of Canada 15 years earlier. Over the next year, one of the most ambitious, tragic, and dramatic campaigns of the American Revolution unfolded. The invasion of Canada tested the dedication, the will, and the abilities of the Continental Army, and forced Canadians and Native Americans to take a side in the growing conflict, with lasting repercussions for North America. But at Ticonderoga, in late August of 1775, this chapter was just being written, and the cause of independence was still almost a year away.